Okay, Council, we have 6:34 to begin our caucus, and as long as we're going to be doing a little bit of questioning as far as our finance director is concerned, we'll skip 2015-08 until she arrives. So if we could possibly move to also this March 19th. 18? 19, 18. If we go to 2015-09, this is a ordinance which is on our third reading, so we will have a vote on that tonight. 2015.
Oh, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Browning?
You were talking about 2015-09.
That's correct.
I presented some information regarding other municipalities in the area and their compensation for elected officials 2 weeks ago now. And we had some discussion, preliminary discussion 2 weeks ago on this ordinance. Something that I actually had come across just today was our suggestions from back in the summer of last year. Find them here. We had compiled a list of suggestions for the financial recovery plan, and it turns out that I had forgotten, but we had this as one of the suggestions back then, even reducing, or actually eliminating council president, reducing salaries for council, and also some other salaries were listed as well as suggestions. So I would just like to reiterate that I think that moving forward, we're going to have to look at these things, take a hard look at the compensation for employees, elected officials, everyone working for the city. And I would ask that we take that into consideration as we consider 2015-09. Also, something coincidental that came out this week, I think it was it Monday? Yeah, it was Monday. This is Sunshine Week, and in conjunction with Sunshine Week, Cleveland.com has taken it upon themselves to look into specifically salaries for mayors in the area. And when they did their survey, they found that the average compensation for mayors is about $70,000, which I think that also includes some part-time mayors as well. But it also includes people who make over $150,000. So looking at this survey and the survey that I did myself, I would again want to reiterate that we are by no means out of line with, I think, compensation in comparable suburbs. There was an interesting quote here in the Cleveland.com article. It says the state, of course we know this, the state gives no guidelines on mayoral pay. It says, so council members must weigh the city's budget, the cost of living, and the responsibilities and time commitment of the post, among other factors when deciding what to pay their mayors. We do need to consider the city's budget and the cost of living. We have one of the lowest costs of living in all of, well, maybe the state practically, in our city. So we want to consider that. The average household income is about $37,000 in Maple Heights. So I would just ask that we take these into consideration as we look at 2015-09.
Any other comments here?
Madam Chairman, just real quick, I mean, I don't know if you're aware, this might be a factor for everybody to consider, and personally, whatever you guys decide is fine with me. But in order to qualify under PERS, you have to have a minimum amount of $1,000 per month in order to, I mean, I don't know if this is important to anybody or it isn't, but I think that's one of the reasons we settled on the $12,000 was because you have to have $1,000 per month to qualify for the health insurance. But that's all, just in case anybody wasn't aware of that.
Thanks, John. 2015-11. This is the land that used to be the TD's. I think we're all familiar. No, I'm sorry. Yes, that is the TD's. Over on Lee Road, which was purchased and then went to a sheriff sale, and we now are the proud owners of this. And thank you, Tony. I think you were the person that brought it to our attention. And this might be another place for development. If it's possible, I'd like to see this move on.
Madam Chair, just real quick, we're not the owners yet.
Oh, we
You
are?
have to first agree, you have to pass this in order for us to purchase.
Well, let's do that tonight if possible. Is there any reason why we cannot pass this on third reading?
No, I don't think so, but there is a point that I wanted to bring up separate from that.
If it doesn't pertain to this?
No, it does. It
move on?
pertains to this, just not pertaining to passing it tonight. When looking at the charter, Article 16, which is quoted in here, Article 16, Section 3, it's the waiving requirement.
It's in that.
In order to waive it, it says that it requires a 3/4 vote, specifically waiving the requirement to send this to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in order to waive the requirement to send this to the Planning and Zoning Commission first, we have to have a 3/4 approval of waiving it, which I believe requires a separate motion. So we need a motion to waive that requirement and then a motion to pass it. You'd have to separate those motions, passage and waiving the requirement.
It's in the ordinance, that should be sufficient, shouldn't it,
I
Tom?
understand, but
I'm asking our law director for help.
I mean,
We've never done it with two different
I
motions.
mean, either way is fine, but I mean, we have always done it this way, and, I don't see why it can't be one motion, to be honest with you, but if you want to make it two, just, I mean, I'm not here to fight, guys. I mean, if two motions makes you happy, whatever, Bill, I mean, Jesus.
well, the point is, if someone wants to pass it tonight but doesn't want to waive it, what do? If someone's for it, but they don't want to waive it, so they want to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission first, they have no option if we make it just one vote.
We vote no.
Well, then you'd be forced to vote against something you made once, simply because we've made two motions into one.
Aren't we making a mountain hill out of a molehill
Why
here?
are you bringing this up?
Not at all, Madam Chair.
We just voted on Schreiber Road and other parcels.
I don't think
That never came across before. Why is it just an issue now?
I don't know. I honestly don't. I couldn't answer that for you.
Madam President,
Yes, go ahead.
could I make a motion to waiver?
I'll second.
No.
You can't do that now.
We'll do it at a time. I mean,
That's
that's-
fine, I mean, yeah, that's fine, I don't think you want to do it that way.
When the legislation comes up.
But I mean, if you vote one, no on the one and yes on the other, then how, it doesn't pass anyway, so what is the point?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know.
The point is twofold. Here's the point. You want to hear the point? There's 2 points. First, as you read the charter, it says requires 3 votes specifically waiving. Specifically waiving, not as part of the motion to pass this. It says a motion specifically waived. So I would say that dictates this should be a separate motion. But secondly, if someone is in favor of accepting this parcel, yet not waiving the requirement to send it to Planning and Zoning, then they would have an option to voice their opinion on both pieces.
And you've already confused the issue by bringing up 2 different processes. When it was contained in the one, I think it was a little more simplistic. This is not rocket science.
This has nothing to do with being simple, Madam Chair. It has everything to do with doing it properly, according to the charter, and properly. This is, when you look at parliamentary procedure, this happens all the time. It's called dividing the question. When you have 2 points in one motion, and someone wants to be able to vote on each point separately, it's called dividing the motion. Now this, we have 2 separate things going on here. We're approving this, and we're waiving it. You want to do it at the same time. I'm saying, I don't believe per our charter and per just common sense, that is reasonable.
Madam Chair,
And it doesn't take any extra effort really to do it. So
Can we allow someone else to discuss this, please? Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I just would like to ask Mr. Brownlee why this issue is coming up now when we have accepted more parcels or previous parcels this year, and this is the first time this has come up. Is that because you just got to that page in the charter?
I don't think we need to be insulting people. The point is, I happen to notice it this time, and I think that we should act on it. It has nothing to do with how many times it's been done in the past. I mean, shoot, if that were the case, then we should not keep meeting minutes for all the meetings that we've failed to keep minutes for, if we're just going to keep doing things the same way we've always done them. But we've been wrong plenty of times in the past, so maybe it's time to wake up and start doing things appropriately rather than traditionally.
Madam Chairman, I'm not sure we've done things improperly in the past. That's the, assuming there. But in any event, make your motion. If you can get a second, so be it.
All right. Okay, moving on.
Madam Chair, I would like to clarify.
Again,
It would be proper, I think, just as you're going to ask for the motion to adopt, that you should ask for the motion to waive the requirements per the charter.
Madam Chair,
yes,
how many acreage is this piece of property? Do we know what the numbers are? Acres. And my reason for asking is, I think that those developers who was looking at some senior living, they had a minimum of acres that they were looking for. I just wanted to know what that comparison was between those two.
Mr. Jackson, we can't hear you down at this end of the table. Maybe you need to turn the mic on. I'm sorry. I heard you ask about the amount of,
I just want to know if anybody knows the amount of acreages.
Please speak into the mic because I'm having trouble with the recorder and the cords.
Can you hear me now?
Well, here's the thing. This recorder,
I'm just saying, am I speaking loud enough now?
yes, now I can see it.
Okay. I was asking about the number of acres that this piece of property was in reference to the amount of property that the developer who was looking to build senior housing was looking for. That's all.
he was looking for 20 acres, if you recall. I think we'd have to go back and look at the different parcels and add them up in order to find out.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 215-12, and this is a
So, Madam
resolution.
Chair, we didn't resolve the issue of the separate motion. So, will you be introducing a motion separately in order to waive the requirement?
I guess that's up to council. Do we have any agreement that we need to waive and follow the procedure that Councilman Brownlee has suggested, or do we want to go to our suspension of the rules and pass this and move it on? Council?
Madam Chair, I don't see how it would hurt. And if that's what the charter says we're supposed to do. And I don't know, do we have a copy of the charter here tonight?
Yes, we do.
Someone?
Of course we do.
The charter doesn't specifically say anything to the point. However, I mean, if you vote no on one issue, if you vote, if you wanted to go to planning commission, just vote no. I mean, I don't see what the difference is, to be honest with you. But whatever, I mean, it's fine if you want to separate the issues, though. I mean, why would you vote yes to accept the land and vote no to waive the planning? You can't. Then it would have to go back to planning, so you can't. The vote on the yes would be a nullity because it would have to go back to planning. I don't know. I mean, am I thinking right? Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I'm not hearing from the rest of council, please. We need to move on. Yes? No? Maybe?
Should we put it on first reading so that we could do whatever?
Not a problem. Not a problem.
I think it'll be on, is it first or second?
I'm sorry.
It'll be on first reading. 2015-12 is a designation of Parkinson's awareness. What month are we looking at?
April.
April 7th. Would you like this this evening?
Yes.
Okay, and then if we move back to our first piece of legislation, Irene?
Yes.
We have 2015-08, and this is the second reading tonight. I know people had questions previously.
More paper. Would you rather not have paper? Hope everyone brought their packet from last week. I prefaced my presentation with the fact that I needed to speak with some of the directors and the chief and maybe realign some of the numbers because we were just starting to set up these new account numbers, and the numbers we used were arbitrary numbers that we had placed in. So I had that conversation at least with our chief of police and fire chief in regards to their particular funds. And I'm still in the process for the special funds, going through those. We're pretty much clear and finished with the general fund, which is really the most important fund because the others are sort of self-balancing. So what I passed out tonight, and I highlighted in yellow, the fund balances that changed from last time due to these discussions that I had with the chief, and basically in the general fund. So that's what I want to focus on, the general fund. If you would like to go down this, and I will let you know what it changes. And I spoke with Chief Papalarge. We added some additional overtime for the police department, which changed the balance for that particular fund department. As we went to the dispatch, basically all I did was just change the name and took out the secretary, and it's just a dispatch department. Of course, in the total, I didn't take it out, so you really want to cross out secretaries, because the secretaries I explained last time was moved to the ambulance building. So this is strictly dispatch. The other numbers moving back up was the fire department. That number was changed after speaking with the chief in regards, again, to some overtime and also some increases in salaries due to promotions. So that number changed from last time for the fire department. In terms of the jail administrators, the number that changed there was an addition for the food for Tom Page Catering. So we added the inmate food for that. The other department that changed was the finance department. The professional services there were changed. For the finance department, we add a few more dollars there. I'm sorry, am I moving too fast?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
One moment. You're going to have to use the mic because you can't hear you down there. Are you able? Okay.
I just said,
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
the packet that you just passed out,
Yes.
is this in, can we just take this and replace the pages that we had from the permanent appropriations? Is that what we're doing with
Yes,
this one?
basically what we're replacing, the general fund. Like I said, I concentrated on the general fund, that's where the deficit, and I wanted to make sure that the expenses in the general fund were okay. Also, I went through the ambulance billing, which is where the non-personnel expenses for police and fire are charged. And to be honest, that's as far as I got in terms of the special revenue, in terms of making changes. And the only other change, well, there was another change. In the capital fund, I added the lease payment that we're making on a generator that was not included in the formal packet. So that's why you see the yellow highlights. But admittedly, I just have to say that I want to make sure that all of this balance, when it was finished. The general fund is fine. Okay, I spent a lot of time because that's where we have our huge deficit, and I want to be sure that the general fund was okay. And then as I go to the special revenues with the various department heads, we're tweaking that still, but it will still be within the budget amount. So to answer your question, the entire packet you can change, it's just that I need to make sure that I've included all of the special revenue funds changes that need to be made. But I went to the ones that I knew were operational to ensure, and of course, still looking for information and just to ensure that we have accounted for all the expenses and revenue for the special funds. So that's the only part, the special funds. But the general fund is fine. So I guess I can say yes to your question, it's just that I just need to make sure that it all ties back to the original document.
And the total appropriations amounts that you have here are the same? You haven't changed those?
No, the total appropriation amount was not the same, and that's why I said I was balancing out.
Okay.
For example, the general fund, due to the increase in the overtime for the fire and police and the tweaking of the salary rates for some of the recently promoted fire personnel, the general fund, which is balanced, increased about $90,000. It went from it was like 90,700. The original for the general fund was 11 million on page 10. The original amount that was appropriated proposed is 11,103,932. And as I said, that went up about 90,000, a little over 90,000. So with the changes, with the addition of the overtime and tweaking the salary rates for the fire department, it increased about 90,000 to 11,194,652. So that was the change in the general fund. The other change that I made was in Fund 252 for the operation expenses for the police and fire. And so there was changes in those funds also. A lot of the expenses actually went down because we wanted to make sure we over-projected we wanted to make sure when we did the first round that we had appropriated enough dollars. But as we went through, and like I say, the problem that we did have is that we were using numbers from 2014. And I think I explained that the 2014 numbers included a lot of payments for 2013. So when we went back to actually look at 2015 as a standard, some of those numbers changed in terms of what we were originally proposing. So that's why you will see, the decrease in some of the numbers. Okay. So, as we go through, like I say, the changes were made in 252 for the operations of the police and fire. And one of the biggest changes that we moved the secretary from the dispatch budget to be commensurate with the recording of the secretary for the fire department. So both of them now are in 252. And then again, as I said, some of the expenses went down because it was mostly over projected based on the 2014 numbers where we had payments in 2013. So that's why those were adjusted. And then the only other adjustment that was made in terms of the special funds were the capital, where we added money for the rest of the generator, which was about 48,000. And that should be on page 14. It was not highlighted, but the $48,227 that says lease generator, that was added, which was not included last time. So the answer to your question, Councilman Jackson, is yes, you can replace this. I would just, double check with a couple of the other administrators just to see if there's anything additional in terms of the special revenue. Not the general fund, but the special. So other than that, this is pretty much what we have. And then we need to keep in mind too that the special funds are usually self-sustaining because we get revenue in to support whatever expenses are there. So, thank you.
Thank you, Irene.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
can we go back to page 6, please? The professional service finance.
Yes. The professional service finances for Rita, as you know, we have outsourced our payroll. We do not have a payroll clerk in-house. Our payroll is being done by Rita. They have a service providing accounting payroll to many of the municipalities. So that's who we're using.
Do we have any other questions for Irene before we move on?
Just in general on the budget? Sure. All right, now.
You had a comment, Councilman? Or-
Yes, Madam Chair. Let's get prepared. On page 1, regarding the police department, we have estimated, now looking at your new document, a reduction of, it's about the same number, a reduction of about $800,000 in that portion of the police department. What cuts have been made to realize that?
Well, if you will look at the document, the last column, the fourth column, reflects the change between the projected 2015 and the actual 2014. So if you read horizontally, you'll see for salaries, there was a $500,000 cut. A lot of that has to do with employees leaving, and we want specific names and all of that. I'll defer to the chief. And of course, as salary decreases, so do the fringes associated with those salaries.
And so the fringes used to be just the one line item, now they're broken out into the many line items.
Right. During our presentation and meeting discussions of the temporary budget, I explained that the fringes were all placed in one line item in the miscellaneous fund. And as you probably know, with general accounting, the fringes should follow salaries. So we attempted to move those for 2015 2014, they still be convoluted because of the way they were booked or paid, in terms of this miscellaneous account number. And I really didn't spend a great deal of time going back to break all of that out for 2014, since at this point it's a new issue. But 2015, we went through all of the bills for the health and dental and what have you, and assigned those according to the departments. And that's one of the things that necessitated a change with the fire department. There were some assignments that needed to be made in addition to an increase in overtime. So, I mean, the line items are sort of self-explanatory if you read them horizontal.
So, in both the fire and police departments, we've seen significant reductions in salaries and wages, $500,000 for police department, $700,000 for the fire department. What has been changed to realize those reductions?
What has been changed?
Yes.
Separation of staff. I don't understand what your question is.
So these reductions have all been from those who have left the departments in the past year.
Yes, these numbers compared to 2014. Correct.
Will there be any further reductions in salary in order to see that this is as it currently stands right now?
This is projected as of now what we know. Of course, we do not always know when people will leave or resign.
Right.
That will have to.
But that would reduce it, that wouldn't make it go up.
It will
So-
reduce the expenses, yes. Right. But I can't sit here right now to say who will be leaving and when they'll be leaving. I think they're required to give no more than 2 or 3 weeks' notice. And Chief Propalarge may want to say something about that. If I may, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I think Chief Propalarge is.
Go ahead, Chief.
To the chair, just to the councilman, just a point to be made. Even if somebody leaves, there's a significant amount of money that needs to be spent in terms of their buyout generally. So you may not see a reduction. Just because somebody quits doesn't necessarily mean you see a reduction in terms of the appropriation. I believe your comment was that it would go down. It may not, depending on what that person's buyout was and whether they're a very senior tenured employee.
Thank you, Chief. Irene, we've requested that some of the council send you emails with their questions. Is that working?
I received a couple, but for the most part, I didn't receive very many.
Okay. Any
Madam
other?
Chair.
One moment, please. Are there any other questions from council? Alex, go ahead.
Okay, if I may. Irene, do we have any plans in the works to still look at the Metro Health plan for projected savings for this year and from CPA for the collection of city income taxes? Are we going forward with that? I haven't heard for a while.
Right. The HR director, who basically handles, responsible for the health plans and what have you, I was privy to sit in on the meetings that were held, and there were many. This year we vetted about 4 or 5 different companies, including the county plan. And upon our research with other counties and with other municipalities, and also compared it to what we had and what we needed, the decision was felt that they were not the one for us this year. But we did thoroughly speak with a representative from Metro Health and also check with some of the other municipalities. And my experience, one of the biggest drawbacks was that you have to sign a 3-year contract with them. But they did not give a guarantee of a 3-year rate, which means after the first year, the sky was the limit. And some of the municipalities had experienced that their first low rate, and then the second and third year, it went up. And so also compared it to the actual benefits, the locations of the clinics in terms of where we could go, We actually met with the VPs and the head of it. I had invited, asked Fidelity, our broker, to actually invite in the people from the actual insurance companies. So we actually met with the guy from Aetna and Medical Mutual, versus just dealing with the broker. And I think we came out with the best deal that we could, which means now we have a one plan, which is beneficial to all staff. If you remember last year, the non-bargaining staff. Well, anyway, the plan that was presented to them really, in some instances, appeared to impose a hardship. So we wanted to rectify that and put everybody back. And so the benefits are much better this year because we're back to the old plan. And so, and I think the staff is seeing some benefits from that in terms of the co-pays, the deductibles, and what have you. And it cost a little more, but actually it really did it because the other thing too that from a financial standpoint that was sort of a risk is that we were partially self-funded. And being self-funded, you never know where the claims are going to go. So now we have a fixed rate. And when you add the two together, what we were paying last year, like the self-funded piece and the fixed cost, is about the same. It may have increased maybe $100,000, but for the benefits, it's a much better plan.
Thank you.
CCA, I know I have not had time, and I do understand, I think that we have to give a 6-month, notice when we read, so we will definitely take care of that. We're just trying to get through some of the bottleneck, and of course, you're trying to recruit your staff and transition. So hopefully, in part, for the second quarter, the early part of the second quarter, we will. And I will also talk with some other municipalities that's using, I know Warrensville uses CCA. So I'm going to, talk with them just to see, because they had contemplated moving to Rita. And my understanding is that was, for whatever reason, changed. So I just want to hear your thoughts and your research.
Thank you, Larry.
Thank you. Thanks for your work on it. That cleared that up.
Okay, this, I believe we have...
Madam Chair.
Mr. Brownlee, you have another question for Irene, or would you
Yes,
like to
ma'am.
move on?
I see that you've broken out the other administrative, which I think is a good idea. Just some questions regarding a few of them. I see professional service in quite a few different ones.
Which page?
Multiple pages,
Oh,
but
okay.
professional service is in multiple different places.
Yes.
What's kind of the qualification for professional service? What falls under that?
Well, it would be anything like auditors, accounting, those that require usually some type of certification, and I can't name them all now. But for one, like the auditing or fees, and there are some professional services that we may have from other, I think in some of the funds we have, but anyway, it's those type of like auditing expenses or other type of professional services as it denotes that would require usually some type of certification in that area.
On page 6, under the mayor's office, we have broken out multiple different line items under other expenditures. A question about a couple of we have office supplies and then we have operating supplies. What's the distinction there?
Well, office supplies are usually consumable items, as you know. Operating supplies would be anything that could be purchased to last longer. I mean, it could be staplers or some type of minor equipment, like maybe a calculator or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we just put money in, like I say, to ensure that we have enough money to cover. And I want everyone to keep in mind that in accordance with the county, the requirement is that the budget is basically other administrative when it's sent to them and personnel. This breakout is basically for our internal management, and these numbers could move, in terms of the allocation between office supplies, operating supplies, or professional service or membership dues. That will not affect in any way our submission to the county. But this was done in an attempt for more transparency as we asked for, and also for better management so that the directors will know what is, how their money is being spent versus just all lumped into others. But in terms of our submission and our requirement for the county, this is not a requirement. It will not be sent to them that way. And so a dollar you see here now, it may change, but there's no consequences if we spend more in office supplies and less in operating supplies. That's just internal, as long as we do not exceed the bottom line.
So what was, I see $1,200 in operating supplies. That's a lot of staplers.
Well, like I say, money is placed just in case. The mayor's office sometimes requires things that other departments may not, just by the nature of his being mayor and being responsible for a lot of city activities. So I cannot sit here and give you an itemized list that will add up to that. It's just a placeholder in case he has some project he's working on or whatever. And at this time, I don't need to try to say he's going to buy 5 staplers or 2 calculators. That's not necessary. It's just money in the budget. It's better to have more money in appropriations than we need, so we try not to exceed. But our concern should be the bottom line, because that's what we're being audited on by the county and by the auditors.
So you don't have any reason to believe you'll spend $1,200?
I don't have any reason to believe that anybody's going to spend any of these numbers as they're allocated.
So we could take that $1,200 and spend it on something else?
You can take all the numbers out. This is just an arbitrary assignment based on our business here in the city.
I don't think arbitrary is a good way to budget. I don't think arbitrary is a good way to budget. So there's seems to be no justification for the $1,200.
Well, that's not so.
The professionals, I haven't heard any. You said staplers. They're taking off a lot of staplers to add the $1,200.
I did not say staplers. Staplers are consumable, but I'm saying like it could be calculators or anything like that. I'm just giving you a hypothetical, but if you want to get to the definition, or if you want to come into it, I'll send a note and just say the definition of operating supplies. I will send a definition of operating supplies to you.
Well, we need a justification of the amount, not a definition of
Okay, well,
the...
we'll have to go through all of these and take a lot of numbers out. That's what you're saying, but I don't...
That would be a great idea, because then we could spend the money perhaps on something like the building department that needs more resources, something like the police department that might need something. Instead of putting $1,200 for calculators and staplers, perhaps we should be looking to spend that money somewhere else. But let's move on.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Brownlee.
I have a question, please.
Mr. Brownlee, I think you've taken up enough time with your questions, which I'm sure are all valid. However, we need to move on just a little bit, and I would suggest that you put your questions that are very, very important to you in an email, and I'm sure our finance director will answer them for you. And we will also have yet another meeting on this budget. But I also hear someone else would like to make a comment here.
It's not a comment, it's just a quick
Question. Go ahead, Councilman.
Irene, page 8, line item for account number 52805 contingency. Can you explain what that is and why there's an increase on that?
This amount was also budgeted last year, and as it says, it's contingency, it's placed there for emergency. It's just that this is the amount that was spent last year. And so, but we budgeted that because we talk about 90 days and emergencies and breakdown of equipment, which is always good. And plus, again, we should not be budgeting every penny, because we do have to have saved money for the reduction against our deficits for the fiscal emergency. So that's basically there in case of something happens. Say, we really have a sump truck or something like that that breaks down that require a major repair. beyond just the regular repairs and maintenance and kind of stuff. So it just sort of like, in a way, a rainy day fund.
Okay, does that balance include the 21,000 that we did not transfer out of that fund?
The 21,000
somewhere else?
is a revenue number. It shows up in the on the revenue side. These are the appropriations, so it will show in your estimated resources. The transfer, we had transferred, I think last year, the 100,000, 250. So this year, in terms of this budget, just 21,000 that was left, that was appropriated. But it would show up on the revenue side.
Thank you.
Madam
And
Chair.
I'd like to conclude this session of Caucus at 7:20 and move on to the actual meeting for this evening. We will continue the discussion, I'm sure, at our next meeting or in between.